RX Television on rxmuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition and Liquid Sun Rays. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB, pros, competitions, life, whatever's on your mind, it is all on the table. The Arnold Classic say about 2.5 weeks away. Hard to believe the 2019 contest calendar is about to kick off in 2.5 weeks. Dave, some big news for RX Muscle heading into the Arnold Classic, or at least the build-up to the Arnold Classic.
Yeah. It's funny, every year I always say to myself, you know what, now that we've been doing this for so long, I'm always like, you know what, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And then I kind of throw it out to the universe and I say, all right, well, if someone comes through and they want to sponsor our coverage, then we'll go, because then I have a motivating factor. And at the last minute, someone always comes through. Obviously, my good friend Aaron Singerman texts me. He's like, all right, well, what are we doing for the Arnold? I'm like, because I had asked him about it a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, you interested? And he's like, absolutely. And we sat down and we talked on the phone. We ironed out a contract. And so Redcon 1 will be the official sponsor of all the Arnold coverage that's pre-Arnold, at the Arnold, post-Arnold, including the Arnold Australia. And that's enough to motivate Dave Palumbo and Sid Faruqi to get on an airplane and go out there and cover the show. Obviously, later this year, I'll probably be missing the Olympia. I will be missing the Olympia because my third child will be being born just around the same time as the Olympia, so that won't be possible. So I figured, you know what, if I'm going to go to a show this year, it might as well be the Arnold Classic. And so the Arnold series, the Iron Road to the Arnold Classic series, sponsored by Redcon 1, will be starting up probably in the next couple days. The first interview I think we're going to be doing is Victor Martinez, and he's been looking really good. So his daughter was sick today, but on Thursday we'll be doing that interview, and that'll be kicking it off. And of course, we'll have all our usual, predictions videos. We'll have an iron debate. We'll have, all the top guys and women being interviewed prior to the show. Get a little hype build up for it. The truth is, Sid, I haven't seen anyone talking about the Arnold very much lately. I mean, Chris and I talk about it on the radio, but there really hasn't been much hype. And we're going to start that train rolling forward pretty fast right now.
It's funny because, it is around this time, be it the Olympia, be it the Arnold Classic, 2 to 3 weeks out is where you start to get, some of the athletes that are going to be on stage starting to post some pictures, starting to generate some buzz. We posted a picture of Josh Leonardowitz a couple of days ago. Yeah. He's looking his usual freaky, massive self. There hasn't been a lot, however, and I wonder now if that's going to change. But again, Dave, this is one of the exciting things for what it is that we do as RX Muscle. Again, we affectionately call it the, Road to the Arnold Classic. And in September or August, we're going to do the Road to the Olympia. This is a really cool part, leading into a big show where we get to talk to some of these top athletes, find out what it is that they're doing to prep for this show. One of the biggest shows of the year, what their mindset is, what's going to be different. That's how you build up this hype. And of course, as you said, we certainly will be having some preview segments, some iron debates. Chris Aceto, some of the brightest minds in the industry, you guys will put your heads together and, try to figure out what's going to be what in Columbus, Ohio. But again, big ups to Aaron Singerman and Redcon 1 sponsoring the Road to the Arnold Classic, and of course, all of our Arnold coverage, which will start in the next couple of days. Let's get to the questions. Again, the first 2 questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. The first question, Dave, weird question. If Winstrol, Anavar suppress natural testosterone, how do we still make gains on them while taking them alone?
I don't believe that Winstrol and Anavar suppress testosterone. I haven't seen it in my experience and use with athletes, myself. Also, I think a lot of these things are dose related. If you took, the dosage of Anavar is 20 to 30 milligrams a day, right? But if you're taking 300 milligrams of Anavar a day, it has effects that we're not even aware of. And it might aromatize and it might somehow suppress natural testosterone production. But in the dosages that we recommend, if it does suppress it, it's very small. I don't see it. I see guys doing Winstrol Anavar cycles coming off with no PCT and they have no problems whatsoever. So that's why I recommend that. I recommend, milder cycles for people who've never taken cycles, because why even have to deal with pituitary suppression or testicular suppression? There's no reason. If you took Anavar and Winchell and you still produce your own natural testosterone, then who's better than you? You're going to get a great boost. You're going to make nice gains because your receptors are so fresh. And there's no reason to start throwing testosterone and equipoise and all those other drugs, trenbolone, in there. Once your body isn't really responding to those weaker drugs, now you can use stronger drugs, and then obviously you're going to have to deal with the PCT and turning your body back on. But that's the reason we do that. And once again, you can go for blood work and verify. Some people do get suppression, but 99% of the people do not. Or if it is, it's very minor.
Next question is from JK. He does reference, he thanks you actually for the new workouts in the app. So if you want to address that before or after this answering this question, but he wants to know, how do you normally include supersets? Do you do some heavy compound stuff first and then toss them in at the end?
My first of all, on the Dave Palumbo Experience app, which is what he's referencing, that's my app that's been around for quite a while. It's a reference of all my articles I've ever written, all my videos I do. We do an exclusive Q&A on the Dave Palumbo Experience app every week just for the app members, and I answer everyone's questions on this. So if you have questions and you submit them, I answer them, and I'll put them on a public forum so that everyone can see the answers. So not just the person who asked the question, but everyone who's an app member can see that. Likewise, now we just started doing weekly workouts. Everyone wanted that, and I'm like, all right, you know what? It's so easy. I just take it for granted because it's just, all right, I just got to switch around a few things. But people like to freshen it up. If you want a weekly workout, we put it up on the app every week. Something new you can do, and little tweaks here and there to the program. As far as supersetting goes, when I used to superset, obviously there's giant sets, which are kind of like different exercises all in one. And then supersetting, you're kind of going back and forth between just two exercises. I used to love to superset like biceps and triceps, for instance. So I would do bicep curls, tricep reverse pull down, stuff like that. And I just work them in throughout the whole workout. You don't have to do them at the end or the beginning. I do it throughout the workout. I might go and do, say, bench pressing. Okay, I might do incline bench pressing, straight sets, 4 sets. And then for my next exercise, I might do dumbbell presses with flies. And then I might go to another superset of let's say cable crossovers, and decline dumbbell presses, maybe. So I mix it up, and sometimes, if you're doing legs, which is obviously a bigger body part, I might do squats and then go run to leg extensions, superset those two. And then I might do leg press and leg curls, So once again, I don't do supersets every time, but when I do throw them in, I try to shock the body. And that's what changing the workouts are all about. If you do the same thing all the time, you do stagnate. But let's face it, the basic movements of bench pressing, squatting, deadlifting, bent rows, those are your meat and potatoes. That's what's building muscle. So you don't want to abandon those because you're doing, high rep supersets all the time. You can, once again, for shock effect, you can throw them in every once in a while, especially while dieting if you're a little weaker. But on a regular basis, you want to do your bread and butter exercises.
Let's go to our Instagram question. Our Instagram handle is official_RX Muscle. And again, we mentioned the upcoming Arnold Classic coverage, a lot of what we're going to be doing in terms of our interviews, our preview segments, and then, of course, everything on the scene. A lot of that's going to be on our Instagram page. Let's go to John Patty Curran. Dave, a lot of the old school bodybuilders used to supplement with high amounts of desiccated liver tablets. I believe one of the purposes was to, quote, enhance the pump. Your thoughts on supplementing with this? It seems to be a forgotten habit from the old days.
Desiccated liver was for a number of reasons. For very high in vitamin A and D, a lot of vitamins in there. Obviously, liver itself is somewhat of a protein source. You got to remember back in the 80s, and 90s, early 90s at least, there was no really good protein powders out there. Everything was like basically powdered skim milk with sugar in it. And there weren't like fatty acid supplements. There was nothing. So desiccated liver was an old school thing because guys used to eat liver because they figured, there's good vitamins in there and there's protein in there. But if you think about it, liver is kind of the it's the chemistry set of the body. All the crap is filtered through there. So you don't really want to eat liver, you know. And then they created liver pills where they took the kind of the fat out of the liver, but you still have, who knows what's in there. There's no one testing for the impurities in liver. Nowadays we have essential fatty acids. We can take separately coming from fish oil. We have vitamins that are high quality. You can take it in a vitamin mix. I just think that desiccated liver is old school, like outdated at this point. And I think while there's still people that like to use it because they think there's some kind of magic behind it, it's just not the case. I wouldn't use it. I don't think it's very healthy for you.
We have a couple of questions on ephedrine. I'm not sure when's the last time we took any questions on ephedrine, but again, both questions want to know your general thoughts on ephedrine. Then the corollary, one is, can I take it with Clen for more fat burning? And the second one is there something worth adding in a cutting cycle? If so, how long?
Yeah. Ephedra is not a very good fat burner. It's kind of a crappy fat burner. It's a generalized beta receptor agonist or stimulant. It stimulates beta receptors generally, meaning that it stimulates the beta 1 receptors on the heart, which makes the heart beat faster. It stimulates the beta 2 receptors on the blood vessels and the bronchial tubes, which makes them open up and dilate. And theoretically, it stimulates possibly, some beta 3 receptors on the fat cells, which can cause some fat mobilization. But it's so generalized that if you take too much of it, you get the heart racing effect. Obviously, it's a central nervous system stimulant. I think ephedra's best effects is really if you want some focus, mental focus, it's a good stimulant. And that's what probably a lot of people used it for back in the day. As far as clenbuterol goes, clenbuterol is a really good beta agonist because it's a beta 2 agonist. It doesn't stimulate beta 1 receptors, so it doesn't have an effect on the heart. It might have an indirect effect on the heart if you drop your blood pressure too much. It makes the heart beat faster, obviously, but that's not because it's stimulating beta receptors on the heart. It doesn't affect those beta receptors. Clenbuterol is a beta 2 and possibly beta 3 stimulant. We don't really know why it burns fat. We think it's because it stimulates these beta 3 receptors on the heart pretty prodigiously, but clenbuterol is actually probably the strongest fat burner that we have known to man, aside from DNP, which is just something that's not worth using because it's too dangerous. So I like clenbuterol because it does have tremendous fat burning effects and it works really quickly. Within 2 weeks, you get some really good effects on clenbuterol. It would be really ridiculous to combine clenbuterol and ephedra together at the same time because they both compete for the same receptor. And clenbuterol is a better fat burner. So if ephedra gets to the receptor before clenbuterol does, then the clen can't bind and you don't get the great effects of it. So in essence, ephedra can inhibit clenbuterol from working as well. So you would never take them together. Some people used to do 2 days of clenbuterol, 2 days of ephedra, thinking that the clenbuterol you wouldn't get acclimated to it as much. But think about it, if you're stimulating the same receptors, then you're not giving the receptors any time to recover. So that's kind of foolish. You might as well just stay on the clenbuterol all the time.
We have a lot of questions. Let's go to Kirill WBK. Dave, how much does inflammation of the stomach lining, gastritis, affect the uptake and absorption of nutrients, and especially protein? Can it inhibit muscle gains while on cycle?
Protein digestion starts in the stomach, so obviously an inflamed stomach might make it hard to, pre-digest the food. Ultimately, though, the protein digestion is finished in the intestinal tract. So, I guess it probably won't really affect, absorbability, but any kind of chronic inflammatory type of situation in the body is not good for muscle growth, because when that's happening, the immune system is hyper-responding. The body's first, its first goal is not to build muscle, it's to get rid of this inflammation. So we never want to have some kind of infection, chronic inflammation, or any kind of injury going on in the body, because we're not going to optimize muscle growth and fat loss because that's not a priority for the body. So yeah, if you have gastritis or you have some issues going on, you want to really take care of that and address that if you want to be able to maximize the muscle gains that you make with your physique.
Let's go to Shoal Aesthetics. Dave, he goes on to ask top 5, but I guess your top tips for keeping a small waist. I know overuse of drugs and overconsumption of eating can cause stomach distension. So I was curious, what did you do to keep your waist tight?
I probably should have done a lot more because I think all the food I ate, it definitely made my my stomach get bigger than I would have liked. Obviously, the goal back then was as big as possible, and no one cared. We didn't really know about the facts of eating so much food. I'll tell you one thing, when I started taking a fiber supplement, that kept my waist a lot smaller because it kept the volume of food lower in my body because it moved everything through my intestinal tract way faster. Whereas if you're eating 12 times a day and you're not taking fiber, you're retaining so much fecal matter in the intestinal tract that you're actually pushing out your abdominal region too much. And I think once I started using fiber on a regular basis, and then I made my own fiber supplement with Fiberlize, it was like a miracle. Once I stopped competing and I continued to use Fiberlize, my waist got smaller and smaller and smaller, and my distension went down to almost nothing. I mean, granted, if I eat Thanksgiving dinner, it'll look bloated like anyone would. But on a regular basis, I walk around, my stomach's flat now because I use a fiber supplement and I don't overeat my food. So the good thing about the intestinal tract is it's muscular. When you don't stretch it and you don't use it as much, it shrinks back down like all muscle in the body does, which is a good thing. And that's what happened to me, and I think a lot of other bodybuilders noticed that too. Key is fiber. If you're eating a lot of food, you must use a good quality soluble and insoluble fiber supplement. I can't stress that enough. Ask anyone who uses Fiberlize, they'll tell you, man, this stuff's a miracle, because what it does is it allows you to keep that waistline smaller because it's keeping the waste moving out of your body at a much more accelerated rate.
Let's go to Vinny Anthony. Dave, at what point do you incorporate Zeit into your protocol, and at what dose? And does it make a big difference in your physique as to just using Clen?
Well, Zeit is just a diuretic. It's a prescription diuretic. It just flushes sodium and water out of the body. Clenbuterol is a fat burner, so that you can't really compare the two of them. I only use Zeit the day before a show. And usually I use it maybe a half twice a day or a half once a day, depending on how much water the person needs to lose or doesn't use, or how much I'm carving them up. And usually the Zeit dosage I use is a 37-25, because remember, it's a dual diuretic. So the hydrochlorothiazide is 37.5 and the triamterene is 25 milligrams. They have varying dosage ones too, and you just kind of tweak the dosage according to that. But usually a half a pill, like I said, in late morning, early afternoon, the day before the show, and then kind of with bedtime, another half. Usually will allow you to wake up the next morning super dry.
Let's go to Anas Zaydat. At what point will the body use fat and muscle as sources of energy, and the importance of veggies aside from its nutrients? So I guess two-part question.
It's impossible to know if the body's going to use muscle. Obviously, if you're not feeding it what it needs, if you don't give it enough protein, you don't give it enough essential fats, and you don't give it enough fuel to generate, and to do the activities it needs, it's going to be much more likely to dip into muscle supplies. Now, if you're eating enough carbs, in an off-season scenario, your body shouldn't use protein or fat as fuel. If you're in a dieting scenario where you're not eating enough fat and you're not eating enough carbs, the only thing else your body can use is protein, and turn that protein into glucose to use as a fuel source. And that's not what you want, because when that happens, your body will break down lean muscle tissue. That's the only place to get it. Remember, you can't eat 20 pounds of steak and store it for later. Your body just metabolizes and breaks down the extra. Whereas if you eat too much fat, your body will store it as body fat. And if you eat too many carbs, your body can store the carbs as glycogen in the muscles and the liver. There's no such storage facility for protein. So if you're not eating your protein every 2-3 hours, 2 to 4 hours throughout the day, okay, and you're not giving your body a fuel source to use as energy, on a ketogenic diet, obviously you'd be using fat as a fuel source. On a diet where you're eating carbs, you'd be using glucose as a fuel source. In the absence of those, your body's going to use protein, okay, for fuel, and that's not what we want. I think the other part of the question was about eating vegetables, Sid?
Yeah, about veggies, I guess, yeah.
I never really wanted to have to depend on vegetable consumption or fruit consumption for my vitamins and minerals. So I always took them in supplemental form, and that's why I formulated V-Mineralize, which is your vitamins, minerals, and actually fruit and vegetable extracts in one formula that I sell from Species Nutrition. And then I formulated Omegalize because of the essential fatty acids. So those kind of cover your vitamins, minerals, fruit extracts and vegetable extracts, as well as essential fatty acids in those 2 formulas. You take that, you don't have to worry about anything. Any vegetables or fruits you eat on top of that, it's like icing on the cake. You already got your insurance policy taken care of, because you cannot depend on your food to get enough vitamins, minerals, and essential fats. It's very, very hard to do, and there's no guarantee that the vegetables and fruits you're eating are going to even have enough of the stuff that you require. There's no standardization for an apple or for an orange or a piece of lettuce, for that matter. So you can't leave it up to chance. You got to supplement.
Let's go to Nikki Anderson. Dave, question about cheat meals that turn into cheat days. How would you bounce back after an all-out binge fest?
Look, it happens. I have it in my clients, it happens, and I tell them, you know what? You can't punish yourself. You can't try to do 6 hours of cardio the next day to make up for it. It is what it is. You forget it. You put it behind you. You start fresh again the next day. It might take 2 days, 3 days to deplete out everything you ate, and then you just don't do it again. That's all. If you do it again and you keep repeating it, then shame on you. If it happens once, it happens to the best of us. I never allowed my cheat meals or to get that far out of control. I've had a couple of binges, here and there. Never close to a show, however, and it never went past 1 day. So, if it does happen to you, that's it. If you try to punish yourself and over-exercise it off, that's eating disordered behavior. Your body will rebel again, and it'll make you cheat again. So just put it behind you. Assume, hey, you know what? My body needed it. That's it. I'm moving on. I'm not going to do it again.
Well, let's go to Big Pete Bodybuilding. So he has 2 questions. Your thoughts on Meldonium for blood flow. And, he asked about nootropics. We've addressed nootropics in the past, so if you want to touch on it, go right ahead. But Meldonium for blood flow, do you have any experience with Meldonium?
I have not used it personally, no. I don't necessarily know if it's anything that's warranted for bodybuilders. When I take a lot of fish oil and essential, fats, as everyone knows. I use my Omega Lyes twice a day, 3 pills. That means I'm taking 3 grams of fish oil. I'm taking 2,600 milligrams of evening primrose oil a day. I'm also taking a lot of vitamin E in my V Mineralized formula, as well as all the essential fatty acids I eat in my meals. Okay. Now, when you consume all those essential fats like fish oil and vitamin E, those are natural anti-inflammatories. As a matter of fact, they're so natural. They're so potent that you will bleed if you get surgery. And here's my example. I've given this before, but last year when I had my left shoulder replaced, I went off all my nutritional supplements as they told me 2 weeks before. Had no bleeding problems, nothing. This year I forgot, and I stopped them about 6 days out from the surgery, 5 days out, and I bled terribly. And you know what? They couldn't figure out why. There was no reason for me bleeding. I blame myself for it. I actually needed 2 units of blood they had to transfuse me with. That's how much blood I lost during the surgery. And once again, there was no major screw-ups. I just was bleeding from everywhere. And it's because those supplements don't allow your blood to clot. Now, when you're not getting surgeries or anything like that, and you're in everyday life, that's good. You don't want your blood clotting. You don't want to get a heart attack. You don't want to get a clot in your coronary arteries, or God forbid in your brain and get a stroke. So to me, if you're using the right amount of essential fats and you're doing things the right way, you have a natural anti-clot system already going on in your body from the natural nutritional supplements that you take. And to me, that's the best way to go about it. That's why when I see bodybuilders who I know are taking like my Omega Lyes formula, and they're taking V Mineralized, and they're eating the way I'm telling them to, and then they come back to me and they say, oh, the doctor's having a nervous breakdown because I have this high red blood cell count, my hematocrit's so high. I'm like, you know what, don't worry about it. It's actually giving you an advantage, blood, because the more red blood cells you have, the more oxygen carrying capacity you have. And there's no way your blood is going to clot anyway, because you're on a ton of fish oil, you're on a ton of essential fats, you're on a ton of vitamin E. This is going to keep you fine. And that's, there's an advantage to that. Remember, cyclists, runners, they want high red blood cells. They kill to have the red blood cell count of the bodybuilder. They can't take massive amounts of steroids because obviously they get drug tested. But there's a competitive advantage to that. Lifting in the gym, it's going to be better for you, okay, and give you more endurance when you're doing your cardio. So you don't want to give that up necessarily. Once again, if you're taking the right supplements and you follow the right routine, the programs that I put together and the information that I put out there, you really don't have to worry about blood flow.
Let's go to Victor Saldana. Yeah, okay, so he names 3 bodybuilders: Dennis Wolf, Justin Compton, and Evan Centopani. Which of those three would you want to see come back and 100% and why? Also, if you were to plug that person into this year's Arnold Classic, how do you think they'd do? So again, it's Dennis Wolf, Justin Compton, and Evan Centopani.
Yeah, I think Dennis Wolf is kind of done at this point. You know, he's older. He's in his 40s. You know, he's got injuries. I don't think he's going to be the Dennis Wolf that we want him to be. I think that Justin Compton, being the youngest guy of the group, probably has the most potential. I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know if he has any health issues. We'll probably get him on the show at some point to talk about what he's been up to. You know, he probably is just being smart. He wants to keep his health and wants to live a long time, and maybe he had some issues. I don't know, and we'll talk about with him when we get him on one of these talk shows one of these days. But I think he would probably have the most potential to come back. I think he's the most complete, you know, of him and Evan. I think he's got better legs than Evan. I think he could do more damage, you know, when he's in the best shape of his life. I love Evan's physique. Obviously, I'm good friends with Evan. I think that Evan's legs held him back a little bit, you know, and it's not his quad development. It's more of his inner adductor and his glute and hamstrings are just not as thick. But, you know, no one has probably more genetic talent than Evan Centopani, though. I mean, the guy is just a genetic freak. I saw it from the first minute I worked with him back in, you know, the early 2000s. He's gifted, you know, and so is Justin Compton in that sense. And Dennis Wolf was also in his heyday. I just think that of all three of them, I think Justin has probably got the best theoretical potential to come back and do well.
Let's go to Raymond Zaret. Dave, have you ever heard of using glycerin to help hold water? Tony Hughes spoke of it when he was doing his podcast with Mark Bell.
You know, people have been talking about glycerol as a hydrating agent for years. From back in the, Dan Duchesne talked about it back in the early 90s, you know. The problem with glycerol and fluid consumption and trying to hydrate with glycerol is that when glycerol gets metabolized and it's done, all that water it pulled into the bloodstream gets dumped back under the skin. So there's a rebound off of glycerol. So you got to be very careful about timing it. You know, drinking a little glycerol, first of all, glycerol doesn't taste very good. It's like obnoxiously sweet. But if you included glycerol in some kind of a pre-workout, you probably hydrate a little better. But you got to remember, when it wears off, you go the opposite direction. You dump water. So a lot of people don't like that fluctuation. 1 minute you look really dry and hard, next minute you kind of look watery. So they don't really use it a lot. And once again, it is hard to get down. It's kind of obnoxious tasting. I had a liquid creatine product. It was the only patented liquid creatine product that was actually worked, that was actually solubilized creatine that was in a stable form. It was suspended in glycerol to help it as a delivery agent into the muscles, and it worked really good, but it was obnoxiously, it just didn't taste that good, you know what I mean? It was good, it was like sweet at first, then you're like, oh, it's too sweet almost, you know? And a lot of people didn't love the taste of it. We had a cult following, we sold a lot of it. It was an expensive product to make, and that's why I kind of pulled it off the market. But once again, I just don't think glycerol will ever really catch on as a supplement that everyone uses because of the taste factor and because of the fact that it changes the way you look too quickly.
Let's go to Jay Guy. I'm sure we've answered this in some way, shape, or form recently, but again, it is a question that I'm sure many have on their mind, and that is, what are some ways to help with post-injection pain?
You know, why are you experiencing post-injection pain? That's the main, you know, question I think you got to ask yourself. A lot of the time, the post-injection pain is due to an immune system response. Like, I think a lot of people, like with test propionate, they get sore because their body's immune system is seeing the propionate ester as some kind of a foreign body, or it's attacking, and it's causing an acute inflammation reaction. I always was in pain and felt terrible with Pro. As I got older, it got worse. I don't know if the drugs just you were using, you know, I don't know. I don't even know why, but I got worse. It got to the point where I didn't use propionate anymore because I just felt terrible. But I'll tell you something, because it's an immune system reaction, if you take 2 Tylenol, all the symptoms go away. That feverish feeling, the achy soreness, everything. It will take it away immediately. But the Tylenol will only last 3 to 4 hours, and then it kind of comes back if the stuff's still in your system. But if you want immediate relief, 2 Tylenol.
Let's go to Nate Flex. Actually, I'm going to ask this one next. Let's go to this one first. Prime. How do some bodybuilders keep that dry, hard look all year round, even when they're in off season? Is it a matter of muscle maturity?
Yeah, and genetics. I always had a very hard look in the off season, and it's because my body fat was lean, very low, excuse me, and I just don't hold a lot of water. I always looked dry, and people asked me what I did, and I told them I ate 12 times a day, and no one believed me, that I'm eating 12 times a day, and I look like this, but that's just the way I was. But when I first started and I didn't have as much muscle, I didn't look that hard. I always looked leaner than everyone else, but I never had that retarded, dry, ripped, nasty, grainy look, because I just didn't have enough muscle. So there is a muscle maturity component, and there's a genetic component as well.
Nate Flex, what kind of gear do you believe the 60s bodybuilders used, specifically our very first Mr. Olympia, Larry Scott?
It's a good question. They probably used Dianabol was definitely available. They were using Dianabol, that's for sure. And they probably used a little Winstrol prior to a show, maybe an Anavar. I think those drugs were around in the late 60s. I believe so. Don't quote me. I don't know exactly what the dates were that every drug was made. I know that Dianabol was made, I believe, in 59, 60. So they were certainly using that to grow in the off season. I wouldn't be surprised if they used that up until like 4 weeks out or 3 weeks out from a show, and then they kind of cut it. And a lot of these guys might have been on nothing the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks before a show just to reduce water. Because remember, no one understood really how diuretics worked. They would go in a sauna to sweat out the water. People did weird, a lot of the diets were ketogenic diets, even before ketogenic diets were in vogue, because they realized when they cut their carbs way back, they got in shape quicker. They didn't carb up quite as severely as we do today. And they didn't get as lean either. So it was a different world back then. There was really no clenbuterol, and there was no GH, and there was none of that. It was just basic anabolics that were available. And I have to believe that probably they stuck to the ones that they can go into the US pharmacies and buy, because the stuff wasn't illegal at the time. Any doctor would, that was into the sport would write these guys prescriptions, and they would go fill them, and they would go to the local pharmacy and pay, $10 for a bottle of Anadrol 50, when they came out, or, $8 for a bottle of Dianabol, blue Dianabols. And they knew it was real, and they only used 1 or 2 tabs a day, and of the Dianabol, and they probably took a half an Anadrol a day, and that was it. And they used it for very short periods of time, because no one else knew to do any differently. That was the protocols that whoever developed, and they followed it, and it worked for them.
Philosophical question. We'll hold that one to the end. I saw another one. Oh, Michael Grapner, quick hitter one. Your thoughts on Trestolone acetate?
I don't like it. I don't like it. Trestolone has a very high conversion rate to estrogen. Guys look really estrogenic on it. Higher estrogen levels, more pituitary suppression. Not that all the other ones don't suppress, but it's a very, very suppressive drug. And quite frankly, I don't think it really builds a lot of muscle. I haven't seen anyone who've gotten good results. I think that the whole Tony Hughes came out with this thing. He was selling it on his enhanced muscle, site. And because it had that gray market in between, technically maybe legal, we're not really sure. And people just bought it because it was readily available. I don't think it was a good drug. I think they compared it to Trenbolone, and it really has no comparison. I think Trenbolone is way stronger. And it was one of these fad drugs, I'd call a fad drug. And we'll see in 5 years, no one will even use it again. No one will even know it. They won't even remember it. And maybe someone will try to resurrect it and bring it out again. But who knows? I just don't think it's anything special.
So Theo Leonowitz, this is the last question of the show, asks what you think bodybuilding will be like in the next 50 to 100 years. I'm going to modify that a little bit. Let's talk about the next decade. What do you see happening in bodybuilding over the course of the next 10 years?
I have to believe that probably by the next 8 to 10 years, we're going to probably see some new therapies come out, dare I say. I think someone had asked us this, I think, on last week's show. Myostatin inhibition. Myostatin is a protein that's produced by the body that inhibits muscle growth. It basically keeps us from growing too fast. And each person has varying degrees of myostatin. And if you can reduce myostatin in the body, which we really can't do yet, even though people think that we can, and if they think that there are myostatin inhibitors out there that really don't work. But if we can inhibit myostatin the right way all the time in the body, we should see more muscle growth being unlocked. That means all the other stuff you do, the working out, the eating, the anabolic steroids, growth hormone, they will all work better, basically. And I think that's going to enable guys to get bigger, maybe with better proportion, because it'll allow people to use less drugs, okay, with the myostatin inhibitors and get better results. Unfortunately, probably most people will still use more drugs and use the myostatin inhibitors, but I think we'll see that happening. We might see some gene therapies being developed where people will be taking, injections of certain viral vectors that will insert certain muscle building genes in certain areas. Maybe you want bigger biceps, you inject, muscle growth genes into your biceps. I don't know. That to me seems like the future, because I think genetic manipulation has been getting better and better as the decades have progressed since we invented and since they found the DNA, double helix structure. And I think that's, we're curing diseases now by modifying our genetic code by using viral vectors. I think that's going to become more prevalent in sports. It's hard, almost impossible to detect. So you'll see your Olympic athletes using this, and guys that are in testing situations getting, using this type of technology. And I think that over the next, probably into 20 years from now, we'll really see that technology perfected. And we might have more freaky physiques that actually have better proportion, because we'll be able to almost, modify things in a more, I guess you could say, controlled manner.
On that note, that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave, again brought to you by Species Nutrition and Liquid Sunrays. As we mentioned at the top of the episode, our road to the Arnold Classic will begin in just a couple of days. We will start lining up interviews with all the top athletes, preview segments, and a whole lot more only on rxmuscle.com. For our producer, Tyler Shore and Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.